Hey book buddies, Katie here, and today I'm talking about my favorite books that I read in 2017. Last year was chaotic and exhausting, and I'm glad that it's over, but thankfully, books are the best form of escapism, and escape I did. Just to note real fast, these books didn't necessarily come out in 2017, I just read them in 2017, so these are the books that helped me get through last year. Number 5 on my list is A Study in Charlotte by Brittany Cavallaro. It is set in our world, but the only difference is that John Watson and Sherlock Holmes were real people, and it's kind of funny because she says that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was like John Watson's editor or publisher, and that I thought was really kind of funny. But it follows Charlotte Holmes and Jamie Watson, and they are the great-grandkids of Watson and Holmes. So it's nice because they solve their own mysteries, but it has little nods to some of the original books and short stories by Arthur Conan Doyle. So if you're a fan of any sort of Sherlock Holmes, be it the books or one of the TV shows or even the movies, you'll really like this book. So it doesn't just feel like it's a gender-bent Sherlock Holmes. Charlotte is still her own person, and Jamie is still his own person, but it feels familiar enough to be fun. So this is actually the first book in a trilogy, I believe. She's working on the 3rd book now. Actually, I think she's done with it. It comes out pretty soon. I actually read the 1st and 2nd book in this series. I still really liked the 2nd book, but just not quite enough for it to make this list, but it's still really good. It's a bit darker than the 1st one, but I don't think that's a bad thing. But this 1st one is so fun. I don't want to say that it's fluffy because it's not. It's still a murder mystery, but it's just fun, and I read it in like a day and I automatically fell in love with Charlotte and Jamie. It's just a really fun book, and so if you're a fan of any sort of Sherlock Holmes thing, I highly recommend this book series. Number 4 on my list is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Now, I love Laini Taylor. She is the author of the Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, and I just adore everything she's ever written. She is so good. She is amazing at world building and character building. I just can't rave enough about her writing. So this is the first book in a series, and it's about Laszlo Strange, and he's a boy who doesn't know who his parents are, and he works in a library, and his whole life he's been obsessed with this idea of this lost city, and he vividly remembers once when he was really little, he was sword fighting and pretending to be one of the warriors in the city when all of a sudden he forgot the city's name, and he felt like it was snatched from his brain, and he couldn't remember for the life of him what the city was called. And so he went around and he asked all these people, and nobody could remember its name. And he was like, that is weird, because I know this city is real. And so he dedicated the whole rest of his life to finding more out about this lost city. So in this library, every so often he'll find a little tidbit about it, and he studies it just obsessively, and he's learned their language, he knows all about their fairy tales. He is just a scholar of this lost city. And then, meanwhile, we have Saray, our other protagonist, and she is a blue girl. Like, she's blue. And she's hiding in this tower with these 4 other blue children, and you're not sure what they're hiding from or how they got there, but they're blue, and each of them have little powers. And so Saray's is this cool thing with moths. And that's all I really want to tell you about this story because I don't want to give away plot twists, but Laini Taylor is so good at just blowing your mind, basically. The only reason this book wasn't higher up on my list is because it's a little bit slow at points, and you can tell that it's kind of set up for the rest of the series. She has built this really intricate magical world, and it's completely separate from our world, and so she had to go through and establish the rules of this world and what it looks like and what it smells like and what animals it has and how the magic works. And so she really takes her time doing that so that it really situates the reader and immerses you. But in taking her time to elaborate this world, it does kind of make the pacing a little bit slow. But the end of this book is so just, you start to tear through it by the end, and it ends on a cliffhanger, and she's not finished writing the 2nd one, and it's just torturing me. But yeah, Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. Pick it up, especially if you like fantasy. It is so good. I forgot to mention that this book is sort of violent and triggery though, so make sure you look that up before you pick it up if you're sensitive to that sort of thing. Number 3 on my list is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. This book is so much fun. It's set in the 1700s and it follows Monty, who is a lord who's about to take over his father's estate, but before he does that, it's traditional for boys of this age to go on a grand tour of Europe. So Monty takes with him his sister, Felicity, and he also takes with him his best friend, Percy. Now, what I love so much about this book is that it tackles all of these really important, really relevant issues in a really lighthearted way. So it talks about abuse because Monty's father is kind of abusive, and it talks about feminism because Felicity, his sister, wants nothing more than to go to school and learn about medicine, but she can't because she's a girl. And it talks about racism because his friend Percy is biracial and he's in the middle of 1700s Europe, and so of course he encounters all this racism and this horrible crap. And it also talks a lot about epilepsy and how conditions like that were treated in the 1700s and how people viewed that sort of thing and the stigma behind it. And it also talks about sexuality because Monty is bisexual, and so it discusses how that was viewed in the 1700s. So this book is just great because it takes all of these heavy topics and it just portrays them in such a fun, lighthearted way. This book was so much fun to read. And it's also a really quick read, so it's a decent sized book, but I flew through it because the pacing is great. I love all the characters. Mackenzie Lee told me on Twitter that I can have joint custody of Percy, so he's my part-time son. This is such a fun book. 5 stars. Number 2 on my list is I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. Now, I have the paperback version, but this is what the hardcover looks like. This book is a contemporary about these twins, Noah and Jude, and what's really interesting about this book is the way that it's set up. So Jandy Nelson alternates chapters between Noah and Jude. But the really cool thing is that all of Noah's chapters are told when he is 13, and all of Jude's chapters are told when she is 16. So somewhere between the twins being 13 and 16, something happens and you don't know what it is, and now they're no longer talking to each other. And so it's awesome because it reads like a puzzle, and so you get one piece from Noah, and then you get this other piece from Jude, and it just weaves together into this beautiful tapestry of emotions. This book made me so emotional. I cried so many times, but I also laughed so many times. I also really love it because all of the characters are so real. You know how in some books a character is just perfect and they have no flaws, or a character is just evil for no reason? These characters feel like real people, every single one of them, and so they do these things that are kind of awful, but you get it and you totally understand what they're feeling. This is probably one of the best contemporary books I have ever read. So yeah, 5 stars. My camera fell and probably changed the frame. It does this every time! So the number 1 book on my list, my favorite book that I read last year, is probably a surprise to no one, and that is 6 of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. I love this duology! So this is the first book in a duology, and I decided to choose the first book because I felt like I should only put one on here, and I did like the first one just a little bit better. And if you've been watching my videos, you know that I have been raving about this duology. It is so good. So this book, for those of you who don't know, is set in the Grishaverse, which is the same universe that Leigh wrote her Shadow and Bone trilogy and The Language of Thorns in. And so in this world there are Grisha, or I actually think she pronounces it Grisha, but I've been pronouncing it Grisha in my head this whole time, so sometimes I say Grisha on accident, I'm sorry. So in this world you have these Grisha, and they are basically witches, but they kind of remind me of Avatar: The Last Airbender because they all have these specialties. And so you have heartrenders who are kind of like bloodbenders and they heal things or can control your body. Tide makers who are like waterbenders, and then they have fabricators which can deal with metal, and then they have the fire ones, which I forgot what they're called. But this book doesn't focus on the Grisha. There are a few in the book series, but this is about just these normal, outcasts. And so this book is set in Ketterdam, which is kind of a port city in this universe that Leigh Bardugo has built. And this city is kind of run by these different gangs, like mafia-style gangs. And so they own, you know, these different casinos and stuff, and they all just fight for power. And then one day, Kaz, who is the leader of the Dregs, which is the Crow gang, obviously, because it's 6 of crows, he meets with this rich merchant person who needs him to steal this valuable thing. And so he gathers up this team of outcasts, so there's thieves and spies and sharpshooters and, you know, 6 just criminals. They all team together to go on this heist mission to steal this thing. So she balances these 6 really diverse, really distinct characters, and you still feel like you know all of them. Like, I love all of her characters, and it is so rare for me to like every protagonist in a book, and she does it. There's this one character in the first book who you're gonna hate, but then when you read in the second book, you're gonna be like, whoa, I love you now. How did this happen? I'm adopting every single one of these children except for Kaz, because I'm gonna marry Kaz. You've probably heard a lot of hype about this book, and if you're considering reading it, I say that you should, because I loved it. If you've read any of these books, please let me know what you think of them down in the comments. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, please feel free to give it a thumbs up or subscribe to my channel. I will see you all again very soon with a new video, but until then, happy reading and happy 2018. Bye!